Hello everyone. Today I am going to be showing you how to use the new warp feature in Silhouette Studio to make text or any image look like it's on part of a sphere. Before I get started, this is a bit of a long tutorial, so bear with me. Also, the warp feature is only available in Designer Edition. If you don't have Designer Edition, I really think it's worth the upgrade, but pay attention anyway, and hopefully when you get it, this will be helpful for you. So there are 4 steps that we have to take, and I'll go through each one. First, we have to create whatever words we want and put a grid on it. Second is creating the ellipses that we're going to project onto, so that's what looks like our sphere. Third, we will start to do the projecting, which is moving the vertices into place. And then finally, we will do the fine-tuning to match everything up and end up with our spherical looking object. So we're going to start with a new page here, and the first step is to use whatever text you want. I'm going to use welcome again. Then you can pick whatever text you want to use. I really like the look of this Western font. Of course, whenever you're using text, you want to save a copy of it. I always do that by using Option click or Alt click on a PC, so you have what font it is saved in your document. Then you can go ahead and convert this to a path. Now we're going to go about creating the grid. You'll go to your rectangle tool and make a small square by holding down the Shift key. So you have a lot of freedom with the size of this square, but you want to make sure that its height is less than half of the height of your words. So if you see here, this word is 0.783 inches and the square is 0.288, which is less than half, so we're good to go. Then you want to go to your transform panel, and in the aligning area, align horizontally to the left. Now we're going to use the nifty shortcut of Command and the right arrow, or Control and the right arrow, to replicate this square going across until we cover all of the word. Now, it's okay if you go over, it doesn't have to fit exactly right now. Once you have everything covered, group all of those squares, and then you want to go back to our transform panel and align these at the top. So now we're going to do basically the same thing, but use Command and the down arrow to duplicate the row until we have everything covered. So then you want to select just the rows that you've used and group them. At this point, I recommend changing one of the colors. I like to put the text in black or in a gray color. This just makes it so you can still see that it's there, but it's not distracting, since it's not really what we need right now. So now we want to select both the square and the word and align them in the center. This next step is optional, but if you like, you can expand the word so it completely fills the box. Again, you don't have to do this, but you will get more of an effect of the sphere if you're fully covering your grid. So now we're done with the first step. For the second step, we're going to start by making a copy of our grid and grouping that version, since we're going to come back to it later. So now we're going to go about making our circles. So go to your drawing tool, draw an ellipse, and you want to make a circle by holding down Shift. I like to do it using Option as well, so we go from the center. But you want to make a circle that is larger than your grid. I usually do it by about 2 squares width, but you don't have to do it that size. So once you have your circle, you want to Option click on it to duplicate it in place. So now they're right on top of each other. And now you want to select both circles and your grid and align them in the center. Now we're going to go about making the vertical parts. So this will look kind of like the longitude lines on a globe. So for this, you want to hold down the Option or Alt key for the whole time because you're going to need it. Start by dragging one of the circles in until it matches the outermost lines. Now you'll notice that both of those shrink at the same time, and that's because I was holding down the Option key. So now you want to click on the new ellipse you just made to duplicate it in place and drag in the new one. So you want to repeat this, duplicating and matching lines until you have all of the vertical lines covered. So it won't happen here, but if you have an even number of grid cells in your personal grid, then when you get to the middle, you will have the two converging on each other like this. If that happens to you, then you want to go to your sizing tool here and give it a width of 0.01. That just makes it look more like a line than anything else. But since we don't have a vertical line there, we're just going to delete that. So now we will select all of the ellipses we just made, group them, and move them to the side for the moment. Now we want to do the same thing with our horizontal lines. So we start by selecting the second outer circle and dragging it in until it meets our horizontal lines right in the center. Then we do the same thing, click and drag in. This one only has 2, but whatever your design is may have more vertical grids. So again, we select the ellipses and group them, and we can actually delete this grid now because we don't need it. Now you'll see that we have 2 sets of ellipses. You want to select both of them and align them center. Now what you will see here looks similar to this grid that we have, except the squares along the outside aren't squares, they're more distorted. So this is what we're going to be mapping onto, is this area in the middle right here. At this point, you actually have the option to change what kind of distortion you have. And by that I mean, if you make these different sizes, you change the shapes of the squares in the middle. See how when I make this bigger, these are more square-like, and when I move it in, they're more distorted. So if you want a lot of distortion, you want your ellipses to be smaller. The only requirement when you're doing this is that both edges are on the outside of the other ellipse, so this has to be outside. You can't have it like this, because then you won't have enough grid cells for your projection. So now I'm going to take both sets of ellipses, now that they're how I think I'd like them to be, group them, and pick a different color other than red, because we want it to contrast with the red lines in the grid. So I'm actually going to go with black and make them a little heavier, and then move this towards the back. Now that we have our ellipses set up, we can start projecting onto the surface. So we select both our words with the grid and the ellipses and align in the center. Now you should notice that in the middle you can't see the lines very well, because they're exactly overlapping each other, and that's what we want for the middle. And as you go towards the outside, the red lines and black lines are farther away from each other. So what we're actually going to do is make the red lines match the black lines using the warp function. So we want to select our grid and open the warp panel and click on select warp selected shapes. You'll see this green square come up, and it will have orange squares on the corners, red dots around the outside, and blue dots in the middle. This is based on what we see over here on the right, divisions, rows, and columns. For now, for this project, you want to leave them as is. If you're doing a different shape and you want more control, then go ahead and change them, but for our purposes, the default action is good. So now what we want to do is take the corners and line them up with the corners of our new grid section. So that's going to be these intersections of our two sets of ellipses. This looks pretty weird right now. Trust me, it'll get better. Now that we have mapped our fixed points, or the orange squares, into place, now we can go about changing the lines. So the first set of lines we want to look at is the green lines around the outside. We want to match them with this ellipse here. So you do that by taking one of the red dots or handles and moving it so the green line moves towards the black one. This will take a little bit of getting used to, but after a while it won't take you very long at all. Now, there are a couple of things to notice here. One, is that the green line may not exactly line up with the black one, and that's okay. You just kind of want it as close as you can get it because you might not be able to get it exactly. And the other thing is that you also want the corners of the green lines and red lines to match the corner of the black lines. So I'll zoom in here to show you. If I move this red handle backwards, see how these red lines shift away from these corners? That's not what we want. So you'll play around with these handles until you get the green lines and the red line and the corners of the red lines matched up pretty well. Then you'll go ahead and repeat with the other side. The nice thing about symmetrical shapes is that usually you can just mirror where the handles are on the other side. So that will work for the bottom. And now we'll do the sides. Again, we're trying to match up the green line with the black one. And in this case, it's the blue lines that we're trying to match. And that whether it's the blue lines or red lines that you're matching will depend on whether you have an even or odd number of grids. But just make sure you're looking for having these intersections match the outsides. So again, we'll do this outside, trying to make the blue lines intersect and have the, and have the green line on the black one. Okay, so now we're actually in pretty good shape, but you'll notice that some of the red lines in the middle aren't quite overlapping with the black ones. You can leave this as it is and it will be perfectly good, but if you want to be a stickler, which I do sometimes, now you can use the blue handles. So you want to grab onto the little blue dot, and as you move them around, you'll notice that the lines move as well. It just so happens for this type of transformation that you always will want the dots or the little line, you want them pointing towards the outside of the ellipse. So we're always going to pull these away from the center. And that actually looks a little better to me. So now we're actually done with the hard part. Now that we've got everything all matched up the way we like it, we'll go back to our warp panel and say release warp. That gives us a regular cutting path. So then you can drag your words away from the grid and color them however it is you like. So that is how you go from regular text to something that looks like it's been projected onto a sphere. Once you get good at this and you start practicing different things, there are a lot more things you can do. For example, you can map onto multiple parts of the sphere. So here I used these three words and mapped them to the top, middle, and bottom, so you get even more of a sphere look here. You can also transform photographs in this way. I will warn you though that when I tried this, it took several minutes to process. So if you try it, once you click release warp, walk away and have a cup of coffee because it's going to take a while. So that is the end of this tutorial. I took you through the 4 main steps of how to convert words or an image to looking like it is projected onto a sphere. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments and I will do my best to answer them. Bye!